I think from a common sense standpoint, to think that we're exposing ourselves to these frequencies, these man-made EMFs that are inducing voltages on our body and in our body, and to think that's not going to do anything as far as long-term health effects, that's a little silly to me. We forget that we're electrical beings, and that's a crucial part of maintaining optimal health, is maintaining our electrical homeostasis. Who's doing these studies, and who's funding the studies, and what are they trying to accomplish with the studies? Who's interpreting the studies? There's a lot of factors there that you have to consider.
This is Decentralized Radio. I'm Tristan.
And I'm Ryan.
The goal of this podcast is to help educate you on how to live your most optimal life. We will host industry expert guests to shed light on topics that matter.
We are not gurus, rather two individuals who have had to pave their own path to health and vitality, independent of the centralized systems that plague modern society.
All righty. How's everyone doing? Welcome back to Decentralized Radio. Today we got Rob back on the line. So this is part 2, Grounded Athlete. Part 1, released, epic, one of the best podcasts we've ever done. So we're continuing the conversation because we had a lot more to cover. Robbie Poo, Earth Poppy, how you doing?
All right, man. I'm super happy to be back with two of the coolest dudes doing podcasts.
Is this the first? The first part 2 we've had? I think it is.
This is our first.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
It's like, what do you guys? Yeah, this is our first. I thought we had gotten into like the Matrix and stuff in the last one, but maybe I just didn't remember correctly.
So there was some technical difficulties from my side, but I think it's a blessing in disguise because the listeners are in suspense now with Ryan's amazing outro from the last episode, and we ended, kind of talking about EMFs.
I did see that. That was perfect. Really, really good.
I just was winging it.
It was on purpose.
Yeah, there were so many things I pulled from that one too. Like there's like so many like different topics I was able to turn into separate videos, and I still have a bunch I still need to like put out. And there was a ton of stuff that we talked about there. So that was a really good one. I enjoyed that one.
Well, it's really fascinating, and I'm not even kidding. I'm like, yesterday I talked to my dad for 30 minutes about like grounding. He's an electrical engineer, like an actual electrical engineer. And then I'm messaging this guy on like Telegram as well. It's like there's not enough data or science out there to really have these conclusive, definitive statements, and it's really fascinating to get on and talk with you. We just talked with Carrie B about the Matrix. We're going to dive into that. Like talking through these things, I think is so fascinating because we're kind of on the frontier of science. We're ahead of science pretty much, and where we left off was in this EMF umbrella effect space of body potential. Richard Feynman, and I'm curious, maybe you could explain that a little bit and get us going here into why grounding can be, more or protective and beneficial for against EMFs.
Yeah. So one of the common assertions with grounding is that you're protected against these EMFs, these electromagnetic fields, these non-natural man-made electromagnetic fields, which is partially true. It's not entirely true. There's a part of those EMFs that grounding is really good at redirecting, and that's the electrical side of things. That's the electric fields. So grounding is really good at redirecting those electric fields. The magnetic portion of that is a different story. That's very hard to shield against. And so grounding is not effective for that aspect of non-natural EMFs, particularly the ones that we're concerned with, these extremely low frequency non-natural electromagnetic fields, radio frequencies, which can all have detrimental effects on the body. They can induce voltages on the body, and these are measurable too. But so the claim that they're protecting you against EMFs is partially true. It's the electric side of things, the electric fields.
The way I see it is, it's protective against like electric fields, but then it's also like solving or helping reduce the burden from being exposed to it, right? Because you're getting that free electron flow, which non-native EMFs are stealing via, causing oxidative stress in a short story there. Mm-hmm. So it is complicated. And you said this was like a challenging area to research and write your book about, right?
Yeah, this chapter was it was pretty challenging to write because I did a lot of research on it to write this chapter, and if you go out there and you collect a lot of these articles that are made available on PubMed and all that, you won't find like a conclusive answer to it. There are researchers out there that say just don't worry about it. They're not strong enough to really have to create these physiological changes in the body. And then there's some researchers that are just like, we need to stay absolutely away from these. These are awful for you. They're gonna ruin your health. So it was
EMFs in general. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Well, non-natural.
Yeah, non-native, non-natural. Okay.
Yeah, we're always exposed to some sort of electromagnetic fields, natural, that are naturally occurring. Yeah. But the ones we're concerned with are the ones that are man-made. It was really difficult to write that chapter because of the lack of consensus in that particular area. I think from a common sense standpoint, to think that we're exposing ourselves to these frequencies, these man-made EMFs that are inducing voltages on our body and in our body, and to think that's not going to do anything as far as long-term health effects, that's a little silly to me. So that's how I try and approach it. But from a research standpoint, that was a difficult chapter to tackle.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, too, when people always, I mean, I'll get comments all the time whenever I post anything about EMF or share a video about EMF or something about Wi-Fi. Or we did an episode with Anthony Smith from EMF Safe, and we talked a lot about grounding kind of at the end, but we also talked about Wi-Fi, how Wi-Fi is like a microwave, and it's also like Bluetooth because they're all 2.4 gigahertz and stuff like that. And in my mind, it's like, even when you look at them in isolated studies, you got to remember that you're being bombarded by a lot of different mediums all at the same time. If you have your cell phone on and your Wi-Fi on and you're wearing AirPods, and you also have to think about it in the fact that for most people with their Wi-Fi, they leave it on 24/7. So to me, it's always about duration and the amount of exposure, because even exposure to good things in large enough amounts sometimes can be bad. That doesn't go universally, but like exercise, can be a hormetic stress that can turn negative in like certain amounts. That's different for everybody. Obviously, that's like a nuanced thing as well. But I don't think they're really looking at the fact that we're surrounded by all of this radiation like constantly, and that maybe a little bit of it doesn't do that much to you physiologically, but over time it accumulates. And we've seen in the last, 75 or really 100 years, that as we've accumulated more and more things that radiate more and more frequencies, we have more tech consistently over time, that we have higher rates of disease. And really that's predominantly one of the major things that has changed over the last 100, 150 years, is that we have the AC grid and all this stuff. And so to say that doesn't have any part of the story in the rise of disease seems to be super naive, like to not even look at it at all. And I think, inherently, maybe people in big tech probably know these things. I mean, you have warnings built into your iPhone here. If you go to certain settings, you can actually see, like, not a black box warning per se, but it's like a warning saying like, hey, to reduce RF radiation, don't do this. Like, it literally says it on your phone. I can find the setting. I created a screen recording of it. It's hilarious. And then now with like France banning iPhone 12, and also their regulations around Wi-Fi and tech for kindergartners and pre-K, like the fact that other countries are talking about this, which they're usually the last people to talk about it anyways, but the fact that it's even being talked about at all anywhere is kind of alarming. And Tristan had a really good post the other day sharing about the, I think it was like I can't remember what it was, but it was like the amount of radiation like allowed per country or something like that.
It's the RF power density threshold limits by country. And yeah, they vary tremendously. So everything you just said, Ryan, I think is a great point, but it's correlative. That's the problem with a lot of these research articles, studies done on EMFs is they're epidemiological. So they're looking at population, seeing if they live near a transmission line or whatever, and high EMF areas, and then correlating stuff. So that's already a notch down in credibility. Then they're doing rodent, studies a lot because it's hard to measure actual humans in direct EMF environments. So, and then a lot of the research is done, or that was done, is coming from like Russia, and again, notch on credibility. But I would say, I don't know, I kind of disagree because I've just dove so deep into this, but at the same time, it's hard to sift through all this. And there's actually industry funded research as well that conflates things also. And people like Deborah Davis talk a lot about that, who's also an epidemiological researcher. So, but I found this guy, Dr. Henry Lai, or Lee, L-A-I, and he composed kind of like a collection of over 2,500 studies on EMFs, and broke it down into like RF and ELF, extremely low frequency, so like 60 hertz electrical power, and basically said that like 90% of studies in both RF and ELF showed, significant biological effects. And he breaks it down further into like 84% showed genetic effects in studies since 1990, and 95% in gene expression. So I think it is conclusive, but I think the water has been muddied, and I think the quality of the studies done are actually not like super high. But then getting into the grounding aspect, it's even more, limited. And I was reading something by Gaitan, what's his name? Gaitan Chavilet, which you probably read.
Yeah.
A lot of his stuff, Rob. And yeah, it seems really cool and what I kind of want to get into here is like the body voltage aspect of things, because we're talking about EMFs are inducing this body voltage, and, from the electric field aspect, and then we can lower that by grounding, because the umbrella effect is synchronizing the body voltage with the Earth's potential. But then it gets confusing because you talk about people who mention like optimal body voltage levels, like someone like Clint Ober or Jack Cruz. I think they always talk about like 400 millivolts is like an optimal voltage. Then we talked to Anthony Smith from EMF Safe, and he's talking, the lower the voltage, the better. Like, and he has a body voltage kit that they sell, and I'm going to experiment with. And that when you're in this high EMF environment, it's going to be like, above 2 volts, 3 volts. Like, it's going to be like very high instead of in the millivolt range. And then I'm like thinking about Doug Wallace and mitochondrial membrane potential, which is at like 100, 150 millivolts. So there's all these voltage levels out there, and it's very confusing. I can't imagine if you don't even know what like voltage means. So I'm curious to hear like your thoughts on this. Have you measured stuff? Grounding, not grounding, because I've taken I've taken a multimeter and gone outside, and now I'm like, what does this data actually mean? And I kind of want to talk about this because it's fascinating. I think there's a lot of numbers and information out there that's confusing.
Yeah. That was a lot.
Sorry.
Okay. So really quick, back to what Ryan said was talking about with the EMFs. I think a lot of that, what can be taken out of that is a neglect for the electrical side of health. We forget that we're electrical beings, and that's a crucial part of maintaining optimal health, is maintaining our electrical homeostasis. And what Tristan was saying about these studies and stuff, well, who's doing these studies, and who's funding the studies, and what are they trying to accomplish with the studies? Who's interpreting the studies? What are they misconstruing these studies to make them appear differently than what they're actually presenting, what the data is actually saying? There's a lot of factors there that you have to consider. And as far as the ideal body voltage, I think it's going to change with any article you read, any researcher that does a lot of work with this. I like the SoCals out of Poland. They've done a lot of really, really cool research as far as grounding and its effect on physiological processes. I think they put it around negative 200 millivolts, and that's recorded pretty frequently on the body and in venous blood. So within the body and externally, and I would say probably around that range would be your ideal body voltage, around negative 100 to negative 200 millivolts. Just below zero, not exactly zero, but slightly negative. But as far as the ideal body voltage, or just, biological voltage in general, I think it's so contextual, because the body has to maintain different gradients throughout the body for different processes to occur. So I think it's a very contextual, subjective topic. So I don't know about ideal, though. I don't know if there's an ideal body voltage. I'm sure there is, but I just don't know it exactly.
Hey, friend. Thanks for listening. If you really enjoy this podcast, it would be really appreciated if you left us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, or subscribe to our content on YouTube. This helps us get to a larger reach and a larger audience to spread this wonderful free education. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think that's the answer, of course, but it's just interesting that there's this kind of range, and then what exactly does that mean? So I'll have to look into the research, but I've seen that as well, like negative 200 millivolts, and that, to me, that makes sense. But then I guess going back to grounding and things, because you use a multimeter quite often, what have you found just like measuring shoes, connection, different surfaces? Well, what are you using that for?
Usually for sandals. I'm verifying sandals if they're grounding you. And then I've been doing my own testing with different soling materials for other footwear that I'm planning on putting out there. But around negative 100 millivolts is what I'm at when I'm out grounded. It's usually a little bit closer to zero when I'm in grounded footwear. So it's not as good as being in just direct contact with the earth barefoot. But you're still grounded. It might not be as good as being barefoot, but I would still consider you being grounded. If you're around that zero to negative 100 millivolts. But barefoot is always best as far as grounding.
And that's what I found measuring as well. But then it's like, that's a lower negative voltage. So technically, absolute value wise, it's lower. It's still negative. So technically it's higher. So this is where it gets confusing. But then we talk about inducing a voltage from EMFs, say, would create a higher absolute value body voltage, and then that's bad. So how do you interpret that, right? Because people are asking me questions and all these things, and I'm like, it's a bit confusing here.
And as far as and I don't know if there's like a clear-cut answer, so I'm just curious in your opinion. One of the studies that's cited quite a bit in a lot of this grounding research is Roger Applewhite's study, who essentially just measured the induced body voltage from the hotel room he was in. So the appliances that were around him, the 60 hertz alternating current, extremely low frequency electromagnetic radiation, which induced a voltage on his body that was measurable. I don't remember the exact voltage it was, and I think that's dependent too on how close you are. There's a lot of factors that go into the exact voltage that's going to be induced on your body. But essentially what he found is that through these grounding electrode patches, is that induced body voltage dropped down to zero when he was grounded. And he measured that at 3 different points, at his thigh, his abdomen, and his chest. But so if you're in your house and you're surrounded by these appliances that are plugged in, and there's current flowing, there's going to be an electromagnetic field present. Electric fields are usually always present. It doesn't matter if the electricity is flowing or not. As long as it's plugged in, you're going to be creating these electric fields that you're going to be exposed to. But through a process called capacitive coupling, these appliances, they act as capacitors. Your body acts as a capacitor. So through that capacitive coupling, the voltage gets induced on your body, and that not only changes your exterior body voltage, but also what's going on the inside of your body. So that's affecting physiological processes too. But there's a lot of complexities associated with what's exactly getting induced on your body.
No, I mean, that's pretty interesting. I think one thing I still kind of wonder about is like we can kind of get into this. Like I'm sort of in the city. It's like a giant valley. I'm not like directly downtown, but I'm surrounded by like the grid and stuff. And one thing I wonder about is when you're grounding outside in a city, and in a lot of where my folks live, it's a little more modern, a little more new. So a lot of the power lines run under the ground. So when you ground over that, you ground into the grid a little bit. And can that be negative? Or vice versa, like where I'm at here, the power line runs above and connects to the back of the house. Am I going to get anything residual from the power line above if I'm like directly under that? It just makes me wonder, like, am I getting a net negative effect grounding in the city in general versus like going up into the mountains and grounding there, which probably is more optimal anyways. But I'm just curious, like your thoughts on that. Is it still beneficial, or is it better to try and negate that and just wear like rubber soles to not connect?
Yeah. I think that ties in a little bit to a conversation we had the last podcast, where we were talking about grounding in the basement or on cement and stuff like that.
Did that make it into the episode?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
We did talk about it.
Okay, good. I thought it did.
But you guys had mentioned dirty electricity and all that. And I listened to a few of your podcasts, or one of your podcasts with the last guy, as far as Wi-Fi and all that, and
Anthony,
dirty electricity. So I haven't done too much extensive research with dirty electricity, but from my understanding is it's when electrical current gets so when it's essentially manipulated. That's when dirty electricity occurs, correct, Tristan?
Yeah. It's power quality issue from nonlinear loads, floating voltages from not being grounded. Yeah. Higher static, higher signal or lower signal noise ratio probably.
So is it like rectification, amplification, all that when you're manipulating that load? That's when dirty electricity occurs. Does that sound right?
Yeah, when it's nonlinear in fashion. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So,
gotcha. I think a lot of it comes down to, and this is I think this is an awful answer, but checking with a voltmeter, and that's not always you're not always going to be able to do that wherever you're at. But I think the multimeter is a super cheap, efficient way to know if you're grounded in certain instances, how close you are to zero with that multimeter, how close you are to negative 100, negative 200 millivolts. I think you'll be okay. But again, I don't know if dirty electricity is going to be negating that. I think if your body voltage is in that range that we had discussed earlier, I think you'll be okay. But that's not a definitive answer for anyone. I don't know if dirty electricity is going to be affecting that at all. You're obviously better off being away from these non-natural EMFs in cities, highly industrialized areas, but you can only control so much. So
yeah, that's true. I mean, sort of the rule of thumb I follow is just like more than likely, when you're grounding outside, it's going to be better than grounding inside, even in the basement, because one, you're getting natural sunlight if you're taking your shirt off or whatever, wearing short sleeves or whatever you're doing, and there's less generally speaking, like plugged in. Like you might be getting like residual Wi-Fi or something, or there might be a little bit of a wire above, but at least you're still connected to something. So I think it's still probably more beneficial than like where I'm sitting right now. But at the end of the day, it's like one of those things where it's like, I don't know how much it's worth losing sleep over, rather than like what Anthony talked about in one of our podcasts, or what we talked about before, sort of just like working on the fundamentals and then also working on your indoor environment more, like turning off the Wi-Fi at night, or getting one of those devices from EMF Safe and kind of flipping that breaker off for your room or whatever. But I'll let Tristan jump in because I know he was going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to think about. And what you said, Rob, is right. It's just like, yeah, if you're in a city, it's just going to be inherently worse for you. Like if you're grounding in a city, is it because of the underground cables right below your feet? Maybe, but those could be shielded. We don't even know. Actually, a lot of underground cables are shielded because, that'll save companies money. But at the same time, you're going to be exposed to way more non-native EMFs. So it's again, you're gaining electrons from the ground, but then they're getting snatched right back up. So it might just be like less of a positive effect. And the same thing goes with grounding into, I guess, your outlet. So
you can't stress too much about these things, because I think things start to get counterproductive.
Yeah.
When you're always stressing about all of these things, all that pertain to your health that you can't control, then I think you're gonna end up, in a bad mental state, and that's going to affect your health too. You're gonna be stressing too much.
Are you self-employed or a small business owner and are tired of paying hundreds of dollars a month to centralized health insurance companies for minimal coverage because there is no alternative? Well, I have good news for you. There is. And this podcast is brought to you by CrowdHealth. CrowdHealth is a more decentralized alternative to health insurance, and it uses community and crowdfunding to help its members pay for emergencies when they do happen. They incentivize and prioritize health and personal responsibility, and share the thought that you should really only be using the centralized healthcare system when emergencies do happen. This is what I am on board with, and I have personally signed up for CrowdHealth since I left the corporate engineering world and the medical benefits that come with it. If you want to learn more, you can check out our episode with CEO and founder Andy Schoonover, or you can head over to joincrowdhealth.com and use code DRADIO, DRADIO, when you sign up to get a discounted rate of only $99 for the first 3 months. Centralized healthcare is one of the biggest issues in our society today, and I really love what CrowdHealth is doing to provide an alternative for people who care. Yeah, we're kind of nerding out here because this is like what we love to do, but to be honest, grounding anywhere with bare feet on the earth is good. It's great, and but, that's that takeaway.
Yeah, and we had started this with EMFs, but I think the takeaway from the beginning of this conversation was that they are definitely going to affect your health. It doesn't matter what the research says. From a common sense standpoint, they're going to affect your health. And if you I was talking about all the articles you can look up that are not conclusive. What's also very conclusive is that if you do any search on people that are constantly exposed to these non-natural EMFs that work in high electrical occupations, there's an extremely high incidence of leukemia in those people. On top of that, magnetic fields as low as 2 milligauss are known to affect biological fetuses. So my pull away from all that is that it doesn't take a lot of that power to create biological changes. And I really hope that's something that's taken more seriously in the coming years, because it's, these have the potential to really, really damage people's health. So hopefully we start to see, some changes in the near future as far as mitigating these frequencies on our bodies.
Yeah, totally. And I'm kind of shifting like full time almost into like researching EMFs and focusing on this. So there'll be a lot more to come, trying to line up more guests talking about EMFs. And it's really fascinating. It's very complex. So at the end of the day, like Rob said, grounding can be helpful. But at the end, you also need to consider duration of exposure and power, intensity, proximity, all these things. So we will surely be talking more about that.
Yeah.
Actually, so we were talking earlier, our podcast we did recording right before this, we spoke to Carrie B. Wellness, Carrie Bennett, and we talked a lot about water, the collagen matrix, and how this is basically like this super highway of sending like electronic signaling and messaging and all this stuff. I wanted to get your thoughts on the grounding component to this, because it's sort of like that connection that's made with grounding that makes this so special. I know you've written about this, so I'd love to sort of just give you the floor and sort of let you nerd out about why this matrix is so special and why it behooves us to take care of it with some of these practices, because like you said a little bit ago, we're electrical beings, and this connection within us is so special, and almost nobody talks about it unless you're in our space. Maybe a few people talk about it, but I think it's much more important that people lean on to, because I think it's just as sexy as talking about food. It's way cooler because you got the whole matrix and everything. Yeah. So I'd love to sort of give you the floor on that one and talk about how grounding affects this as we uptake electrons. I know we talked about that a little bit, but we can talk about it a little more in depth maybe in this one.
Yeah. And I don't want to be too redundant with you guys.
No, yeah.
You guys have probably heard a lot of this already in your last podcast, but I can talk a little bit about the water side of things too, because I've been obsessed with water just as long as I've been obsessed with grounding. And so that holds a very dear place in my heart. But I wrote about this, and this is the first chapter of part 2 in my book. It's called The Big Three. So the big three, as far as what grounding is doing from a mechanistic standpoint, 1, it's increasing the density of negative charge in your body. 2, it's attenuating the oxidative stress, inflammation response. Number 3 is that it charges the water protein matrix battery. And that's where we get into the matrix. And so what's been popularized lately is this easy water, this fourth phase water that's been popularized by Gerald Pollack. And Gerald Pollack has done a lot of really cool research in this area, but it's also important to realize that this kind of research has been going on a long time before Gerald Pollack came along, and it all dating back to like the 40s and the 50s with Albert Szent-Györgyi. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Albert Szent-Györgyi, but he was a Hungarian scientist who received the Nobel Prize for the synthesis of vitamin C. But another area that he was heavily interested in was water and energy transfer in the body. And he was really one of the pioneers as far as quantum biology goes. But what he realized is that the body needs faster mechanisms of energy transfer to explain how we're able to operate so quickly, so efficiently, especially in situations where we're just split second decisions need to be made, movements need to be made. And so his whole idea with water is that it organizes itself next to these macromolecules, particularly proteins, to create this lattice-like structure. And we can get into semiconductors and all that in a little bit. But essentially, what this does is it creates a mechanism of really, really fast energy transfer throughout the body that's much faster than the nervous system, the circulatory system. So a lot of this started with Albert Szent-Györgyi. And even after that, you have Emilio Giudis, and along with that, you have Mae-Wan Ho, who I've been obsessed with for a long time now. And then you have Gerald Pollack, along with Gilbert Ling. Gilbert Ling's he's in the mix. He's in the mix there. But so this is the last chapter of part 2 in the book. It's called Earth and Matrix. So it's how grounding influences the matrix, and water is a big part of that. So when I say the matrix, I'm referring to the extracellular matrix in the body. That's connective tissues. So what is extracellular matrix? So when you look at a tissue, and you see cells, you don't really think about the area in between the cells. And that's a majority of what tissue is. It's the space in between cells. That's the extracellular matrix. So this is essentially this is what the cells are suspended in, is this matrix. So what is this extracellular matrix? It's a collection of cells, fibers like collagen, and ground substance. It's interestingly called ground substance, and it's very much related to grounding, I believe. Not because that's what they intended, but it's interesting that it's called that. But you have this extracellular matrix, which is physically connected to these integrin proteins, which traverse cell membranes. And that further connects into the cytoskeleton of the cell, which is essentially the scaffolding of the cell and kind of this highway. So this whole matrix is essentially this highway for energy transfer. And even further from the cytoskeleton, this cytoskeleton connects into these link complexes, which goes into the nuclear envelope, into the actual DNA itself. So this allows energy transfer from the outside all the way into the DNA, from the DNA all the way to the outside. So it's bidirectional, but this is essentially this superhighway of energy transfer in the body. And one of the ways that it's charged up is through light and grounding. The light aspect of it is talked about a lot more than the grounding aspect of it, but grounding is a big part of that. So in the matrix, this is a very heavy, complex kind of topic. So I'm trying to break it down as much as I can. So the ground substance within the extracellular matrix, this is composed of these glycoconjugates. So these glycosaminoglycans, these proteoglycans, these cell adhesive glycoproteins. So these glycosaminoglycans they're these repeating chains of disaccharides. So they are heavily sulfated. So they trap a lot of water, and they're negatively charged. So what you have are these reservoirs throughout your entire body of these glycosaminoglycans and the trapped water, these negatively charged areas, which essentially is this whole body redox system that can be depleted. And it could be depleted when you're not connected to the earth. So when you're connected to the earth, essentially these electron stores get saturated. And so when they're saturated, they can be used for a plethora of different purposes. One, energy production, ATP production. And two is in immune response. So back to attenuating that oxidative stress response when needed, neutralizing free radicals when needed. And so this easy water, what is it? And again, you've talked about this already, so I don't want to get too redundant here, but a big part of this matrix is proteins. These cytoskeletons, the nucleoskeleton, it's mostly protein. And when water comes into contact with this protein, it essentially orders itself next to that protein. And so let's say you have, your hydrophilic protein here, you have the water here. The water starts to organize itself right next to that hydrophilic surface on the protein. So here you have your structured water. Here, right outside that structured water, you have the bulk water. But right beyond that ordered water, you have this collection of hydronium ions, which is essentially H3O+. So that's what happens when water collects a hydrogen ion. So essentially what that does is you have this area, this easy water, this ordered water next to the hydrophilic surface of the protein, which is negatively charged. Right outside that, you have this collection of hydronium ions, which is positively charged. What do you have? You have a separation of charges. So This is essentially a body-wide battery that can be charged up for and used for whatever your body needs it for. I've already stated a couple ones that are really, really important. ATP production, energy production, literally maintaining that gradient within the inner mitochondrial matrix to produce ATP. Because what does it need? It needs protons. Needs electrons. Yeah. So essentially what you have is a battery. And how do we charge that battery up? Sunlight. What's really good at it? Near infrared radiation. And then number 3, grounding. So grounding is a big part of that. And I'm not sure if we talked about it the last time, but I had mentioned inflammatory barricades. And we had talked about antioxidants, conducted antioxidants, chemical antioxidants. So let's say you have a pathogen in the body, and your body walls off this area where there's acute inflammation, oxidative stress, creates the inflammatory barricade, which is relatively impermeable to circulating antioxidants, anti-inflammatory molecules. But what this inflammatory barricade is essentially this walled off sac of connective tissue. So you think connective tissue, extracellular matrix. And so what this inflammatory barricade is in the body is it's essentially an extension of the matrix. And so an important aspect of this connective tissue, particularly collagen, which is the third, makes up a third of the protein in your body. It's very, very abundant. It's semiconductive, particularly it's a p-type semiconductor, which means it's got these holes in it that electrons can jump around. That's essentially what a p-type semiconductor does. So electrons can semiconduct through this connective tissue. So essentially you have this semiconductive protein, ordered water, that has electrons in it, free electrons, and then you have protons outside of that. So this is just one huge battery that's just distributed throughout your body. And I believe this might be the actual biophysical basis for the meridian system. So I believe, and there are a few others out there that believe, that the meridian system is it's this low impedance pathway for electrical energy, not just electrical energy, but light, photons, sound, vibrations, all of this to travel through to create energy for the body, for energy production and immune function. So this might be the actual biophysical basis for that meridian system and how acupuncture works. But yeah, so these inflammatory barricades that we had talked about in the last podcast, these can be resolved because they're an extension of the matrix, and electrons can essentially semiconduct through these proteins and the ordered water that's in conjunction with that to get to these areas to neutralize these excessive reactive species. But yeah, hopefully, I've broken that down enough, because there's a lot in that. But it's a bio battery. It's a bio battery. It needs to be charged up. How does it get charged up? Light and grounding, earth and sun. So,
bam.
Yeah.
That's really it. Like, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, it makes total sense when you think about the need for instantaneous communication in our biology, right? Like, this needs to happen at the speed of light. Like, biochemistry is not fast enough. And this is the foundation for everything. Mm-hmm. And then when you disrupt that via dysfunctional mitochondria, never going outside, never being connected, yeah, you're going to have a whole host of issues. In any system, if your communication pathway is disrupted, how are the right actions going to be executed? Just like, that's how I think about it, right? So to me, I just think about our entire biology as giving your body the right input signals. And you're going to do that through exactly what you just said: light, connection to the earth, obviously, eating real food that's local, seasonal, because when you're disrupting that, when you're creating this mismatch, you're giving your body the wrong signal, or you're disrupting its ability to communicate effectively, and then chaos, or aka inflammation, will ensue afterwards. So yeah, I think you did a fantastic job. We talked about that with Carrie, and Mei Wen Ho and Del Juice, how I say his name wrong every time. It's fascinating.
I don't think
right?
I'm saying it right either.
Yeah, Carrie said it right, and I was like, I said it wrong 5 times after that. But it's fantastic, right? Because we have electricity and proton current in our body, and that that's what is the foundation for our biology. And if you tie it back to just a simple battery, which is what it is, then it makes, I think, a lot of a sense for people. And it's really simple. Get connected, get outside, charge your battery. The more you avoid doing that, the more you're going to be running on 40% and not feeling great.
Yeah, just getting out in nature. And it's, it's interesting. You guys know Hippocrates, right? Hippocrates is the father of medicine, and essentially what he said is that illness arises from small daily sins against nature. When enough of these sins accumulate, that's when disease occurs. And it's ironic that that's the father of medicine, and that's with that's a lot of he's involved with the oath that a lot of Western practitioners have to take when they start practicing medicine. So it's I think it's something, there's something to learn from that, something to be said about that.
Are you interested in 100% grass-fed, grass-finished bison meat? I'm excited to be a partner with Falls Family Ranches. Based in Wyoming, Falls Family Ranches is raising high-quality bison meat the way nature intended. As a native large ruminant of North America, bison is one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can consume. If you're interested in trying out their bison boxes, use code Tristan, TRISTAN 10 for 10% off your first order.
Totally. And it's like what you said, it's like, I think we view in conventional medicine, the body is just simply like a chemical machine. And it's not, because if that were the case, we'd probably have more success with conventional medicine. And so we've removed it's really funny too, because like you explained something that is very complex, but on an understanding level, I think it's very simple and very logical, right? It's be more connected with nature, like be outside, just do what other animals do. Watch your dog. Like my girlfriend's cousin has 2 dogs. They love sitting out in the sun. When they're done, they'll go in the shade. But one thing I always notice now is like every animal but us is connected to the ground, always. And so for me, it's like, I know I've beaten a dead horse and then beaten another one with this thing, but I don't think people like to hear that, because it's so simple that it can't work. Yeah. And to me, I think a lot of people get that bottleneck of like, if I can't like spend a ton of money on something to fix something, then it can't work, because there's like, what am I like? It can't be that easy. You know what I mean? But it actually is. And I think that's what holds people back, is like, they're doing all this other stuff that's really cool and probably does have some like benefit, like buying red lights and like all this fancy like grounding gear and stuff. But like, you might as well just go out into the woods or into the prairie or into the mountains and like touch some dirt, maybe get into a stream, go to the beach and touch the water with bare feet. And you're like getting probably 10 times the amount of like beneficial effect than you would like spending loads of money on your supplement case or drawer that probably 90% of us have had in this community in our own house. And so for me, it always goes back to fundamentals and stuff like that.
It's too easy. It's too simple. And it's something that's, earth. It's high ubiquity in our lives. So usually when something is highly ubiquitous, you see it everywhere. We don't really think much about it. And earth is just one of those things that we tend to forget that is very essential to our health.
So what do you do? I guess how often are you connecting? How often are you getting sun?
I will say this.
Silly questions I was going to say is people always ask like, what's the dosage of grounding and light? And it's like, we don't know the charge rate or discharge rate of our battery, but we know just the more you do it, the better you are.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, I was just gonna say, everyone bitches at me because I wear these outside, and they're like, you're just being a wimp because you're not touching the dirt, which, don't get me wrong, like I kind of am sometimes, but sometimes I just it's easier to walk with those around. But it was funny. We went hiking with some friends the other day with Mikkel, that you'll know, Tristan, and everyone was wearing their Grounded sandals on the hike. I thought that was pretty cool.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, no, I'll send it to you again. I just had to put that in there.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just not always practical to be barefoot everywhere. And that's where grounded footwear is really beneficial to have. It's super convenient to have. Obviously, barefoot's better, but it's a nice convenience for sure. And, on top of that, there's surfaces aren't exactly conducive to health these days. And this is where I run into a lot of issues with the barefoot community because, we're in contact with surfaces that the human foot isn't meant to be in contact with. These are hard, flat surfaces like cement, wooden floors, what have you. That's not what the human foot is evolved for. It's evolved for grass, soil, sand, rocks, what have you. But these hard, flat surfaces, they're not conducive to our biomechanics. So it's a tricky situation because it's almost like, we have to compensate for this thing that we have created, this synthetic thing that we have created, which are these hard, flat surfaces. So I'm at a point where I think it's kind of necessary for us to have something on our feet when we're in contact with these surfaces, which is, that sucks to say, but it is what it is. That's what we've created for ourselves. So.
Yeah, I think you can get kind of disillusioned as being like a naturalist or whatever you want, barefoot maximalist. And I was like that for a bit. And then I was like running on the track and a little more. And I was like, I need shoes with, padding. Like my shins are on fire. Like this is so hard.
Yeah.
And then also, I've done like 25-mile hikes in barefoot, hikers like Vivos or something, or barefoot sneakers. I ran a trail race, ripping up and down a mountain with barefoot, no support. And I was like, my feet, I couldn't walk for 2 days. And it's like, I have pretty strong feet and they're not strong enough. So it is, we got to remember we're just in a different world nowadays. So,
and there's a balance to that too, because we have people that use way too much arch support, and then they've completely eliminated like certain muscle function that's probably causing the arch issues in the first place, or foot problems. And so there's this balance of like, you need to kind of do some of both. To, I think, like, I don't know, I've just noticed that with myself, where it's like I definitely babied my feet way too much to where they had no durability, and then I had to build the callus up for walking on like just rocks and stuff every now and then, because I just had such weak feet. But yeah, there's a balance to that for sure in the modern world.
You have to be very, very strategic, because a lot of people, they go their whole lives, they're wearing arch supports, they're wearing these high cushion shoes, and they go watch Barefoot Joe on YouTube, and he's just like, go wear these barefoot shoes. They're amazing for you. And people just jump right into them every single day, and they're doing high impact activities in them. And it's just like, they get injured, they get stress fractures. It's just like, well, what the fuck do you expect? Like, your foot's been in cushion your whole life. So
It's true.
Progressive overload is always a victor, I get carried away sometimes, but it's interesting. So, obviously you're a high functioning athlete too. How do you balance that? And then how do you incorporate, what's your routine like, on a daily basis? Cause I think you're really maximizing the potential of a high output battery through running fast as fuck.
Before I answer that, you did ask a question earlier, which is like, how often, am I grounded? How long do they need to ground?
Yeah. Tie it in.
Yeah, I think I'm grounded up to, I would say 15 hours a day. on like when I'm awake. I would say up to probably 20 hours a day that I'm grounded. That includes my sleep too. So, because I spend some time indoors, and sometimes I don't always have my grounding mat. It's usually on my bed, and I don't want to unplug it. It's all that. So, but yeah, I spend a lot of my day grounded. As far as the optimal duration, I think we answered this in the last podcast too. But if you think of it this way, humans are meant to be grounded to the earth 24/7, 365. So really, you're supposed to be grounded all day, every day. But if you do kind of a little averaging of all the research studies that have been done, which range from anywhere from instantaneous to a full night of sleep, I would say an hour a day at least. But if you can't get that, really at the end of the day, something is better than nothing. A few minutes, if you can do that, if you can spend a couple minutes outside per day being grounded, you're going to see some positive changes in your life cumulatively. If you're doing that every day, you don't have to be spending hours and hours and hours outside. And really, you don't have to do that anyway. You have grounding mats, you have grounding sheets, you have all these nice conveniences that you can utilize to help you in your grounding journey that can be utilized. So something is better than nothing. I don't have an ideal dosage, and part of that is what kind of state are you in? You in a high inflammatory state? You're in a state of low inflammatory preparedness, as coined by James Oshman, which essentially means your electron stores are not saturated; they're depleted. That factors into it too. So, yeah, I've been quarter miling for about 15 years now. And so that's how my grounding journey started. I wanted to get better. I wanted to beat people. I wanted to be, a really, really good athlete and excel at my sport. And injuries were occurring, and I wasn't recovering very well. And, I feel like I did everything I could possibly do to be the best athlete that I could be. And I felt like something was missing. And then I found out about grounding, and I started utilizing it. And I was just like, all these changes were happening. My training was so much better. My recovery was so much better. And, from that point, I was hooked. But, yeah, I balance running 400 meters. I started out as 100-meter running, and then I ended up at the 400 because the 100, I'm fast, but, I just don't have the foot speed for the 100. But 400 is a good kind of right in between. You can be fast, but you need a little bit of endurance for it. Yeah, I balance that with jiu-jitsu and kickboxing. So it's I have to take care of my body quite good to be able to maintain this. So.
Yeah. And I already said it in the last podcast, because I know we talked about my track history and stuff, which isn't like amazing by any means, but I hate the 400. Always will hate the 400, long distance all the way. Maybe I just trained wrong too. Like now that I know all these things, I feel like in retrospect that I just wasn't setting myself up for the 400 very well. But I was always like a minimum needed the 800 to like pick up speed and stuff. And so for me, I always like dreaded when my coach would put me in for the 400. I was just so angry because he would do it all the time, and it would pretty much derail the rest of my race day, because I was just like, I would do so. I'm telling you, I was like dead last, dude, in the 400, like almost every time.
I think he had a plan. I think he had a plan for you. I think he was in his head, he was like, if I get him to run this fast race that really kind of works on his foot speed, he's going to have a lot more potential in these longer races. So
I hope so. That makes me feel better.
You got to sprint to run faster miles. That's what I realized. Do you have any goals for, you run like seriously, I don't know what it's called, like semi-pro or quite close to pro level times. Like what are your goals for this? And
I was getting paid for a couple of years to compete around the country. So I was traveling to Oregon, Texas, Florida to compete in these meets, and I would win money from it. And sometimes you win a lot of money, sometimes you don't win a lot of money. That's track and field. It's not a very popular sport. It's hard to be successful in track because, it's not a moneymaker. It's not something people are really kind of infatuated with, something you see on the TV. But it's a very pure sport in my mind because, to sprint fast, so many things have to come together in harmony. And when you watch someone sprint full speed, it's a really good way to assess inefficiency and biomechanical flaws. You see if they're they're overcompensating somewhere because really well-tuned sprinters overall they're very harmonic. They're very harmonic athletes. They're able to move their body through space so efficiently and so gracefully, and that can leak into other sports that they do. But really, sprinting to me is a very revealing practice for the human body. Yeah, I'm a quarter miler. I run 46.6 at the moment. I would love to get in. Last year I decided to stop running track. So I left the sport for almost a year, and then I started training with a few buddies of mine, and I was just like, oh, I'm still fast. So I'm going to start competing. Let's see how it goes. And I ran some meets last year, and I was like, oh, I'm still as fast as I was when I left. Which is nice because, I'm at a point in my athletic career where I don't need to do much to be where I was when I was training really seriously. So I'm back to training seriously again. But I think if everything goes correctly as far as training and recovering correctly and, mindset's a huge part of track. I would love to shoot for 45s this year. And eventually get some European races under my belt. That'd be really, really nice. But really, I try not to set too lofty of goals for myself because I don't want to end up too disappointed with myself. I just kind of take it a week at a time, a month at a time. I program everything myself. I coach myself. I don't have any training partners. Really, my only training partner is my electronic timing system. And that tells me how fast I'm running exactly. Yeah, track is a very difficult sport. It's a very difficult sport to maintain when you're by yourself. But I love it. Keeps me in great shape. It keeps me from a metabolic standpoint a furnace. So I just burn through everything. But it's cool, man. I love sprinting, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to do it, but as long as I'm competitive in it and I'm still running this fast, I'm going to keep doing it. So,
what are Olympic level times, 44 or
so
just to qualify, I guess, U.S. Olympic team?
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
U.S. is by far the most difficult team to make. U.S. is so fast, and I take a lot of pride in that. Because we're in a country where we're just producing so many fast runners, and it's really, really cool. But at the same time, it sucks because it's so hard to make it to USA's. But USA indoors, I think I've got a pretty good chance at making it to this coming indoor season. So that's one of the goals, and I think I'll achieve that. I could have went last season, but I didn't have the time. Didn't have the time to go. I was making sandals and stuff. So, but yeah. So to place at an Olympic meet, you would need probably a low 44. Usually nothing above 45. But
to medal at the Olympics or to make the team? Yeah, okay. I was going to say.
Yeah, to medal.
But to make the U.S. Olympic team, probably.
It just depends. Every year is different. Somebody will run, maybe high 44, low 45 and win it one year. And, another year, somebody can run freaking 43 seconds. Track is just all over the place as far as that goes. But, Dude, if I was in another country, I could probably make a team. So it's kind of lame, but yeah, it's what it is. And it kind of sucks too, because we're such a fast country, but in Europe they like track so much more. There's so much more opportunity as far as clubs and stuff and getting involved with track that's just not available here. There are some clubs, but yeah, there's just not a lot of opportunity for track and field athletes here, especially as they start to get older and they don't have, coaches or people to train with. So,
it's interesting, just going back to recovery for a second, because I can't remember who I heard that was talking about it, but he was talking about American football, and he was talking about how he's noticed over the last so many decades higher recurrent injury in athletes. And also the athletes that tend to have longevity come from the more southern latitudes of the United States or have less injury rates. And that's due to their ability to recover and the UV that they have year round to allow recovery to be more abundant. And so it makes me think about how grounding in professional sport could be sort of like what's the right word? Like a backbone for recovery, or maybe like injury avoidance. Because I noticed like lots of people getting like tendon injuries, like reoccurring like ankle sprains, and they're not taking into consideration like the mitochondrial health of that tendon or that area of the body. And so it makes me wonder like how these practices could impact that. I'm sure for yourself, like you've already mentioned this earlier on and probably in the last podcast too, just like recovery is better, healing's better, like performance is better. And I think it has to do with a lot of these modalities just allowing you to make better, like more efficient ATP and just having everything run, smoothly, like a well-oiled machine. And so it makes me just wonder, in the professional world of sports, as like in stadiums, there's so much more EMF there than there used to be. All the lights are like crazy. A lot of the stuff, performance stuff that is in the late afternoon into the night. And so it just makes me wonder about how they could be further optimized to produce better working athletes. That's why it's interesting too to hear about like how high performance is in track and field for like US Olympic stuff, because it makes me wonder like how these modalities could apply there. I'm sure lots of athletes actually use red light, and I'm pretty sure that they do. But it's pretty neat because I think that could be some groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah, and it's already utilized in some sports, particularly our USA Tour de France, our bicycle. I don't know what do you call them? The bicyclers.
Cycling.
The cyclers. Yeah, they already
cyclists.
The cyclists. It's already pretty an integral part of their training. So, but yeah, I forgot your question that you had asked earlier. What you said with that, but it's already a pretty integral part of some programs, and since I've started doing what I'm doing, I've gotten a lot of messages from coaches that are just like, I have my athletes ground before we start our practice and after we start our practice, like because of you. And I'm just like, yes, let's go. That's so cool. And that's it makes me feel really, really good. Yeah, so huge part of my longevity, I feel like, as far as maintaining my athleticism and my speed.
Yeah, that's badass. I think it's awesome to kind of incorporate more of these esoteric, lifestyles into an athletic setting, because it's just something that could make you that much better of an athlete, and people don't even realize it. And I do realize that just being in athletics as a kid, you're inherently just getting way more sun, way more outdoors. I mean, you're grounded somewhat if you're just like falling on the ground and stuff like that, depending on your footwear. But I think it's interesting, and I look back on that as well as and reflect. But man, you think it's like, what could have been as an athlete if you knew what you knew now.
Oh my gosh, all the time. Ryan, you had said something that I wanted to kind of chime in on. You had said something about injuries and stuff.
Yeah. So what I was saying is like and this is just like looking at correlative data, but they were noticing that athletes in higher latitude professional football teams had higher rates of injury and injury reoccurrence.
Yeah. We're also talking about African American athletes too.
Yes,
predominantly.
Yeah.
Mismatch.
Yeah. But it was really interesting because now it all sort of makes sense to me. And I can't remember, like, I'm hardly the football buff, like, honestly, but it was interesting because they were talking about, like, these specific teams have more injuries than these teams in, like the Dolphins, for example, have, like, less injuries than the Vikings or something like that. And they were correlating that to their UV exposure throughout the year, because it's obviously much colder, much darker, and more harsh winters. And so when you have that circadian mismatch, like Tristan was saying with your biology, it was interesting to see that they would have more tendon issues. And it makes me wonder, too, after that conversation with Carrie as well, and we were talking about water earlier, as you age, you have less intracellular water. Your water goes down naturally. And so when I think about injuries and people as they get older, like my dad tore his ACL in his 40s, it makes me wonder, like, during his healing process, it probably would have been better for him if he was red lighting or getting more sun and grounding during that period of time, for that injury in specific too. So it makes me wonder about not only just injury recovery or injury prevention, but as we age, you might need more to have the same effect if you didn't set yourself up when you were younger. So it's just kind of an interesting hypothetical.
So I think I was reading a paper the other day as far as injury incidents in athletes, and I think athletes are getting injured more often, and I have my theory with that a lot of people will probably scream at me for, is that I think a lot of that is started in the weight room. I think the weight room has been ruining a lot of athletes and creating a lot of injuries because these movements that you're doing in the weight room, this, sagittal plane, monoplane movements, they're not conducive to actual sport. And so I think that leads to people getting injured more often, because if you look back, when people were doing strength training, just really simple stuff, or even if, they weren't strength training at all, but they were still really, really good athletes, they were running similar times to what we're running now. And they weren't getting injured as much. So I think what we're doing as far as from a strength conditioning perspective in the weight room, it's not conducive to actual, athletic performance. And, a lot of people would jump down my throat for that. And this is something that I've experimented with too. I used to be a huge gym rat. I used to think, all of my athleticism is going to come from how much weight I could push in the weight room. It's not how it works. It doesn't transfer over that way. And me eliminating a lot of my weight room days, once a week to, so now I'm in the weight room twice a week, maybe max. And I used to go, for 4 days a week, 4 days, maybe 5 days a week. And, I was doing all of that correctly, giving myself enough time to recover, doing the right amount of reps, the right amount of weight percentages. And I noticed that the less time I spent in the weight room, the better I felt in my training, in my running. And I just felt like an overall better athlete the less time I spent in the weight room. And I don't know if this is just a me thing or if it's a lot of people thing, but that's definitely something I've noticed. And I think that's why a lot of athletes are getting injured more often these days.
I 100% agree with that. I think there's no functionality in just those movements. So it doesn't translate at all. And I see that for me, and I stopped going to the gym completely this summer, and all I do is, pull-ups, push-ups, like sprints, running, and hiking, obviously a bunch. And yeah, it's like I'm a big skier, and every year I think skiing comes around, and it's like, how can I be a better skier? And it's like, oh yeah, you can squat more, you could run, you could bike, but in reality, squatting more is not going to make you a better skier or make you less sore. You need to do something that emulates the sport to the best of your ability. So it might be one-legged hop jumps, like just going for explosion, right? And it's probably similar to track. So, and if you have that abundance of force from your, quads or whatever, from just squatting all the time, you're creating so many imbalances, I feel like. And I think it's this weird gym bro culture that this is how you get healthier, and it's all about aesthetics, and these guys can't really do anything functional. And if you just like put some weight in a backpack and walked up a mountain or something and did that twice a week, you'd probably be better off. And what comes, you see, like, farmers are always like, you get this farmer strength because they're just doing stuff like all day. They're not going to the gym. They're just like carrying heavy stuff and moving equipment and what have you. But going back to kind of what Ryan said about maybe mismatch in I guess ethnicity and geography, one thing that's badass about you is you're literally designed to thrive in the environment that you live in because you're Native American. And I'm curious to hear more about this as kind of like the last segment here, because obviously I live in Wyoming. I live right next to a reservation. It's kind of sad, in my opinion. I work for a bison ranch. I'm really passionate about like bringing back what was here on the land and living that sort of lifestyle. So for me, how do you embody that? And then what is it like? Like, do you have family members that are also passionate about this, or is the dynamic kind of just different? And how can we improve it?
Tatanka Ranch, Buffalo and Lakota, Tatanka. I am in the area that my ancestors were ruling for a very long time. And it's very recent in my evolutionary history that my ancestors were on horseback, spearing buffalo, hunting buffalo. So that athleticism is still pretty recent in my ancestry. But
webcam down.
Yeah, switch batteries.
Got it.
There we go.
That wasn't as fast as my last one. All right, where did I cut out at?
Hunting buffalo on horseback.
Oh yeah, for sure. I grew up on a reservation in South Dakota, and I have enough engine in me to be given a number by the U.S. government to signify that I belong to my tribe. I was raised in a very earth-centric culture, and a lot of. So I would watch my family. I would watch my mom. I would watch my family members dance at ceremonies for days and days and days at something called Sundance, which is a very important part of Lakota culture, Lakota ceremonies. And so I would watch them dance for days, a lot of times barefoot, sometimes in moccasins. But I particularly watch my mom, and they don't get a lot of breaks. They don't get a lot of breaks when they dance. And that's part of it. That's it's the whole thing is it's kind of giving your body to prayer, and part of that is dancing, and there's some suffering involved with that. So I would watch my mom dance for days, and I would be in awe watching her. I'd be like, how are you still dancing? How are you still dancing after all this time? And looking back now, it's just like, well, they were grounded. They were grounded this whole time. They were able to keep going and not get tired. And that connection to the earth is a big part of that. And growing up, I was always told, the earth is healing, and the earth can heal you if you stay close to it. Don't deviate far from it, because that's when things start to happen. And, when you hear that as a kid, you're just like, okay, I respected what my elders had told me, but even from a really young age, I was just always very curious. I wanted to know why these things were were happening. And then I found out about grounding, and it was a very profound moment in my life when, I'd gone to school, studied physics and biology, and went to graduate school and all that. And I started to learn all of these things, and then grounding comes along, and I'm able to kind of put these two things together: my culture, the spirituality that I came from, and the science. It's a very, very cool thing when culture and spirituality can meet science. And grounding is that point for me, where it connects all of these different things. It connects my culture, it connects spirituality, it connects science. And that's why I'm so obsessed with it. That's why I love it so much, because it's literally where I came from. It's the culture I grew up in. And now that I can attach something that's also very, very important to me, which is science. I love science. I love physics. I love biology. These are a huge part of what I do now. And I can attach that to something very, very close to my heart, which is my culture. These ceremonies, these ancestral teachings, these elder teachings, I can put these together, and I can give that. I can shape it, and I can shift it, and I can mold it, and I can give it to the world now in a nice package that people can do what they will with it. And hopefully it changes a lot of people's lives. And that's really, really what drives me.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, right? Having that connection, having that virtue of nature and the earth being so fundamental in your life and the culture around you. Yeah, it's amazing. I think embodying that and continuing that tradition is the best way forward. And you're clearly changing a lot of people's lives and perspectives on the importance and value of these topics. So I commend you for that. I thank you for that. It's exciting to be in this kind of movement to drive this forward. And, who knows where we'll be in 10, 20 years, but it's interesting to think how this evolves in the modern world when we have an uphill battle. And obviously, modern convenience and technology, these things are not going to slow down anytime soon. But if we can take nature into consideration when we make these decisions as a society, we might be a lot better off, but we might have to suffer collectively to realize that. And that's unfortunate, but those who have an open mind are going to welcome and embrace this, I think. So
yeah.
Rob, I appreciate you sharing your knowledge. It's really powerful.
Yeah. Experience and nature teach harsh, but they teach best. But it's been a pleasure talking with you guys. I'll have something for you guys in the near future. Some really cool shoots. So, we'll,
hell yeah.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. So
amazing. Well, I think everyone knows where they can find you, but thegroundedathlete.com, the Grounded Athlete Instagram, DA Grounded Athlete on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
Right?
And, I'll be sharing this, but I don't know how many people it's going to get to, because, I got in trouble on Instagram again. So
oh, no.
Yeah, I posted a really funny meme, and Instagram didn't find it funny. So yeah, many such cases. But I'll do my best to get this out to the people as I always do. So
amazing. Well, thanks so much for coming on again, brother. We appreciate you, all your work, and thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode of Decentralized Radio. We'll see you next time.